Benson. My wife and I operate a goat dairy. We milk Alpine Sonnens, Toggenburgs, and Sable Sonnens. And we also have recorded grades because the bucks, my fences aren't as good as I'd like, and the bucks do get out once in a while. So this image is an image that my wife took, and she actually got like an award one time at a conference that it was, she won the picture contest. And so I'd like to tell you that this is this is a beautiful picture, and the lighting was just right, and it really is. And I'm sitting right next to my wife as she took it. She's actually my girlfriend at the time. But the thing this picture tells you is, what side of the fence are the goats on here? Yeah, they're not on the side they're supposed to be on. We went out to get them for milking, and I go, oh, well, the goats are on the other side of the fence, and well, let's go up and around. So we went up and around on the road, and they were still way down they were down closer to the barn, and her and I laid down, and she got her phone out, and I went, hey! And they worked their way up the hill towards us. That's an alfalfa field that we own the field, but we rent that to a large cow dairy. And when the gentleman was talking about earlier about different crops and diversity and grazing different things, my goats have been out everywhere in this little general area around the barn. And that field's been planted to every row crop and every crop that a cow dairy would need. And the only one they will go and graze on when they get out is that alfalfa. They won't go into the standing corn. They won't touch the beans, the wheat, the rye. The corn, the tall standing corn, is like a fence. They're not going into that. It's dark in there. Something might be lurking in there. When the beans are that tall, they're not going to go in that bean field. So I love it when the guy plants it to alfalfa because they get to have a little residual. One time the guy called me and he goes, hey, your goats are out in my cornfield. I said, I bet you they're not in the field. They're just eating the weeds along the edge where the sprayer didn't get. And that was exactly what it was. But this picture, when I had my wife send it to me today, I realized this is the best showing I have of my grazing system, if you will. On the other side is our old cow pasture. And I've spread manure on it rarely because it's our old cow pasture and it was set stocked. And it was basically beat down to bare dirt when our cows were out there when I was a kid. We had dairy cattle, milked 60 Holstein cows, and they beat that spot down to, pretty much just, again, bare dirt. But as I have the goats out there now, I still have a really good growth of grass there and everything because I'm going off the residual that's in the ground. Some people, believe that, and I really do because it really grows great. So you can put the lights back on. So if you just look at that, we'll leave the picture up there, and I might reference it a little bit. But we can have the lights up so I can kind of follow my notes. I didn't make much of a PowerPoint. I haven't made a PowerPoint since I was in college, and my wife works social media marketing for the American Dairy Goat Association, and she's on the computer all day, and she says, when I get done with work, I just want to go to the barn. And she says, I don't want to sit there and help you make a PowerPoint because I don't think I could figure it out anymore. So I'm not anti-grazing at all. I've been to all the conferences, read a lot of the books, love Joe Saladin's outlook on most everything. I have some grazers that I admire. One of those would be Jim Jackson. If you knew him, he had a cow dairy. He was an amazing grazer. Loved his system. Alan Hughes was a real good friend of Jim's, and he had a real unique way that he grazed, and I loved going to that man's farm. And then, of course, Gary Lowe. Gary Lowe's kind of a neighbor of mine, and Gary was in the same financial position my parents were in, where he should have quit in his mind, he should have quit dairying, but he went to grazing, and it really saved his farm. And my parents just weren't going to do that. And so I believe in grazing. I believe what it does for the soil health. I love watching cows out on pasture. And my parents wouldn't allow me to farm the entire farm and graze and everything. And I really didn't want to have beef. So I'm like, I want to be a dairyman. And I got into goats. And I'll tell you, I absolutely adore the little creatures. And, but, and here's the but, running a grazing system like Gary ran, Alan ran, and Jim Jackson ran for my dairy goats did not work. It was so I'm not anti-grazing, but it was when I tried to do it the way they were doing it, it was an absolute nightmare. And to be honest with you, I killed a lot of goats trying to make it work. And it just did not work. The way that the intensive rotational grazing with the break fences and the not set stocking, keeping the pastures tight and trying to get them to help build soil health, and it just did not work with the goats. Yes, Mary?
How did you kill them? Was it wolf?
What's that?
How did you kill your goats?
I want to write a book, Mary. I'm glad you asked. There's a movie, Hollywood comedy called 1,000 Ways to Die in the West, if you've ever heard of it. I want to write a book, 1,000 Ways for a Goat to Die on My Farm. I'm being very honest with you guys. I would start with all the sicknesses and diseases that they can get. And that doesn't all come from being on pasture, granted. And then the ways that they can just get themselves stuck in things and try to kill themselves. I was telling Randy earlier, there's nothing worse. I dehorn every goat on my farm now. There's nothing worse than walking up on a goat that's been stuck, her head's been stuck in the fence for 6 hours and it's an 80-degree day with the sun beating down. There's nothing worse than that. So if you have goats, I know some of the meat breeds for some of the ABGA stuff, they keep the horns for an aesthetic. But if you are just going to have goats, get rid of them horns. It's the most awful thing in the world to have them stuck, just stuck in a fence. When Randy was saying about pulling the head, and having to cut I never had to go that far, like cut the head off, but there's been a lot of fighting to get heads out of places that they should have never been. Some of the ways, I tried every type of fencing. The funnest fencing to use, just out of a pure fun to use, is that roll of the smart fence. I had 2 rolls of that smart fence, and it was the greatest stuff to set out and make breaks with. Now, I'd like to tell you that I had all my ground rods perfect, and I had my fencer just right, and I had everything hooked up, but I didn't. And there's a myriad of reasons why I didn't. Electronet, no way. I ain't got enough time in the day for Electronet. I don't know how people that have it, I applaud them because they must have time in their days. I don't have that kind of time. I really, really do not. I tried single strand of poly. I've tried the smart fence. I tried hot, multiple strands of galvanized. And if you talk to someone who works leather, works at a tannery, they'll tell you that goat hide is the toughest hide in the tannery. And I believe that they can withstand some electrical charges that I don't think cows would be anywhere near to it. Granted, I'm going to say, I wish I had heard Randy's talk back when I started that adventure, because there are a lot of things I did wrong. I'm not going to deny that. But I am going to say one thing. I asked NRCS out to the farm, and they told me I wasn't enough of an environmental impact to be worried about giving me or working with me. I went to FSA and tried to get loans and tried to work, and they just told me I should just be a hay farmer and not worry about them goats. Well, I got a lot of goats, and that's what I wanted to do, so that's what I did. So I haven't had I'm not trying to cry you a river, but I really didn't have the money when I started. I had to buy goats and I had to build an infrastructure of milking. So I didn't have a lot of money to put them out on pasture. So I bought some old woven wire and I was just going to put up woven wire fences. I was going to tear out all the barbed wire and just put the woven wire up. Dad told me, he said, why would you tear the barbed wire off of there? Just leave that up there. So we just ran out the woven wire along the fence, along that old barbed wire fence there, just ran the woven wire out, stretched it with the winch on our side-by-side, and basically attached it to the barbed wire fence. That did, I think, one, I didn't have to go through all the work of getting the barb out of there. Two, maybe there was a little bit of that pain with the barb. But at the end of the day, the barbed wire actually helps hold that woven wire up because goats like to put their feet up on everything. And that's got to do and so I was going to tell you a little bit about the anatomy of a goat and a little bit about their grazing habits. So the goat naturally, when they go out on pasture, they want to, not even out on pasture, when they go out to eat something that isn't in a hay bunk, they like to eat up. They like to have their heads up. And they can actually see behind, almost completely behind themselves. There's a little spot they can't see, but what was explained to me is that's an adaptation that when they're putting their feet up on something and trying to eat up and eat leaves and branches and up trees, brush, it's an adaptation so they can watch what's coming behind them for safety. So when they go out and they put their head down and eat grass, they don't mind that, but they really rather just eat with their heads up. And so they really like to, they say goats can defy the laws of gravity. They almost can if you really are a studier of the goats. Who has goats in here? So I would like to say so there are a few smart people in the room. No, anyway, I'm not making it sound like I'm very smart, am I? But, so I had to abandon the idea of keeping them tight and that whole building the soil health and I just had to allow them to go out on the pasture that I had. And it's about 10 acres in all with the woods. If you can see the woods up there, they do get to go out there and really express their goatness at times, and go out, and they like that when it's really hot out. Because if you haven't ever noticed, at least I don't know how the meat goats are. Does anybody have dairy goats? Dairy goats do not like the sun. They do not like the beating hot sun. They would rather go out on a day like today and run around. And they don't like getting rained on. Cannot stand that. They will run towards the barn. One time I told Dad, I said, I'm going to go somewhere. If it rains this afternoon, please go let the goats down from the upper pasture. I got home, it was pouring rain. I said, you get the goats down here? He says, no, they got themselves down there. They put about 4 or 5 of them, 10 of them put their feet up on the gate, and the gate fell over, and they came running down. So they don't like to be tight. When they're grazing, a group of cows go out and kind of graze in a spot. I don't know, sheep maybe go out and graze. The goats got to constantly be moving. I don't know what that's about. I guess maybe I haven't studied their behavior enough, but they have to just constantly be moving. And most goat people with dairy goats don't let their goats out on pasture. I really like to let mine out. If anything, obviously I like the exercise. But what they want to do is they want to go out right after milking. Yes?
I just had a question about that. Is they don't like to let them out because it decreases production, because they try and kill themselves? It's easier for the operator?
So with that eating up, where they always want to be eating up in the canopy, there are very few goat breeds that have any natural resistance to worms at all. So a lot of people leave the goats inside because it's a form of parasite control. When I said the goats don't like getting rained on, if I have hutches that I have made, calf hutches, they're the super hutches, and I'll raise about 4 to 6 in those hutches, and what I do is I have wheels in the front of the hutch, and I'll move those. Those goats, when I see them later when they're milking and in the herd, they will go out when it's a little bit of rain. So it is kind of a conditioning thing. The original herd I had, we bought them, they were raised inside, they were never, and then they stayed inside at our place. They can be conditioned to the rain a little bit. Yes, Mary?
If I remember correctly, in your early days, you had a couple of flatbed, like hay wagons
Yep.
for shade.
Yep, if I'll pull the hay wagons, they're just my hay racks, because the one thing is they can get underneath them. So I'll pull those out on the pasture when I'm trying to have them out there, and they'll lay under them, or they'll find the shade under them. So yeah, it doesn't have to be anything real extravagant. I've told Dad if we ever really wanted to make one, we'd like make sides off of one of them, and like that one would just always be out there. But time, I got to have the time. So I just pull the ones that I have out there, or we had a flat rack and a couple hay wagons. So yeah, they're not going to go out and graze all day. Like they want to go out after milking in the morning when it's nice and cool. They want to, be out there for a while and just they want to run. They want to jump and play, and they want to eat. And they eat a lot of grass. They really do. They will not touch green clover on pasture. They'll walk right past that. Maybe the small white clover, but like your purple clovers. If someone could prove me wrong on that, go ahead. But mine won't touch it. I seeded the bottom half of that pasture with beautiful clover, and they would just walk right past it. When it's dry, they'll eat that, but they won't eat it when it's green. Love alfalfa, but they'll eat most any grasses. When I said mine have been out a lot, which they have, I had a field of sorghum, when you were mentioning sorghum, out across the road from the barn, and of course they got out and ran across the road, wouldn't touch that sorghum. Then when I made it for baleage, they still wouldn't touch it. So I think I'm gonna bed with the last bale that, so sorghum never worked for them. I just couldn't.
They pick at it when you use it for bedding?
A little bit, but not much. And they definitely didn't like it when it was made wet either. So like in a baleage, they did not like it at all, and they wouldn't eat it green. So there must have been something about it. So let me look here, see if I got anything else on my notes that I want to tell you about. If there's definitely any questions, go ahead. I'll answer any question about goat that I can answer. I get asked about, I told Jeff, them guys over there, about half a dozen times a summer about grazing the goats for clearing buckthorn and brush. That's not the business that I'm in. I'm in a dairy. I can't take my goats away from where I milk them twice a day. So have I used the goats to clear brush around home? Yes, and they do an amazing job. Have I done one grazing project with a neighbor with my young stock and dry does? Yes, and they did an amazing job. They'll beat your expectations clearing brush. They love that. They're just destroyers of trees. If you want trees gone, they will destroy it. And they love to put their feet up on stuff. One will stand underneath, and the other one will get up on the other one's back, and they do know how to kind of work together. I don't think they really know that they're doing that, but they kind of do. So they'll beat your expectations that way, but most people that do that, as I have friends that do it, they do not expect for their animals to gain any weight when they're doing a clearing job. They are meant for clearing. They'll come back and they'll look rough and they'll be thin, and they don't use good dairy does for doing that. They don't even use high-end boar genetics for that. They're getting dairy weathers, cull dry does. They're getting, some buck kids, from dairy or beef operations, but they're nothing. They're not gonna. If you're gonna do like a grazing operation with beef cattle, you expect to go graze and they're gonna gain some weight on you. The goats will not do that. They're just, we don't have the genetics in our goats in America. And if someone wants to say I'm wrong, they sure can, but we just don't have the genetics in them in America that have any natural resistance to worms, and they just don't gain that good on the brush. They'll clear it. If I was going to suggest a meat breed that does have a slight bit of, and I did have this meat breed at one time, that does have a slight bit of worm resistance, would be the Kiko. And if you've ever been around Kiko goats, they're too ornery to die. They are a tough breed. They're a flighty breed, and they have some natural worm resistance because they were developed, not even developed. They were basically dropped off on tropical islands, and then they did gain some natural worm resistance that way. Or that's one of the breeds they used to develop the Kikos. Yes, sir.
With the worming issue, so do you have to worm regularly, or do you feed them something to avoid worms?
I don't let out, first thing is I don't let mine graze down to the bare dirt, and they wouldn't do that anyway. So I graze tall, as they call it. So it's the layer of where the worms are lower. That's the first thing. And another thing about that grazing down to the bare dirt or grazing short, the goats won't do that anyway. If you think you're going to leave them on a spot longer to try to get them to eat it when they get hungry the next day, it'll be 2 or 3 days before they even think about eating it. And again, I sell milk, so I can't lose that type of production waiting for them to start eating that grass. So that's the first thing. I don't graze real low. And then we'll do Flamantia scoring if we think they're getting wormy, which is, you pull the eyelid down and you look at the pinkness or basically like this part of your eye. And then they say you should flip up the top lid and look at that too. But the goats fight you a lot more on flipping the top one up. So if I'm doing a quick check, I do that Flamantia score and look at the redness. If it's as white as that tablecloth, she needs to be wormed instantly. If it's red like that folder, she's great, no problems. If it's a cream color, you better get her wormed pretty quick. Wormers, I can go on and on about wormers as far as I've used Dr. Paul's natural stuff. I've used anything from Safeguard to Cydectin. They won't eat diatomaceous earth, so don't even try to put that in there to try to worm that way. The powdery part of it, they won't. It's not palatable to them. They are finding that copper bolusing helps with worms. Just went to a talk last fall that the copper bolus can help because it's the boosts the immune system. So, or is it copper? Yeah, copper. It's not iron. It's copper. So, goats need copper anyway. They're unlike sheep that way. So, we copper bolus about once a year anyway. So we kind of I'll rotate my pastures to help with the worms also. Hopefully we get through all of our pastures, and then we get to the point of the summer where we want a copper bolus anyway. And in the meantime, if we're seeing something that's, Flamantia score or something gets diarrhea, then it's time to use something heavier. So, and that I've used Velbait. I've used all the products, and none of them are great, but it's better than doing nothing. So, yep. We ship to LeClaire cheese. If anybody is interested in goat dairying, they would, if you're on a route, they would probably take you if you were gonna be of any decent size. It all goes to cheese. It's most of our cheese. Most goat cheese is Chev, which is a soft, unripened, looks like cream cheese. Ours gets made into a lot of that, but they also have some hard cheeses too. That was a slight reason I wanted to ship with LeClaire, was because they do make hard cheeses. We get picked up twice a week. I have a dream someday that I could sell fluid milk, but there's no plants that do that in our general area. That's a very niche market. All of ours just goes to cheese. So my wife will make a little lotion with it. Sell a little pet food. You can do that legally for pet food. But most of ours always goes to our dairy. So let's see if there's one more thing here.
And how long, are you talking, you milk 300 days? You milk 150 days?
Yep.
Kind of what is that cycle? So
dairy goats are dairy animals. They were bred to be animals that fed us milk. They're as much of a foster mother to us as dairy cattle are. They were bred for long lactations. We milk 305 days, so we do the standard lactation. We test with DHIA just the same way that cattle do. So actually, goats have been our foster mother longer. Some people would argue longer than dairy cattle have been. Because they were easier to keep, they were smaller, people kept them with them. Our dairy goats are very, very friendly, and they're very, very personable. Like I said, I shouted for these, and they came walking up the hill towards us. And that's because they've been genetically ingrained just to hang out with us and be around us. It's an old English farming journal excerpt that I read about goats one time, and the guy said, and it's very flowery because it was written in Old English and I can't say it verbatim, but the words that I always got out of it was, it said goats. They are fence crashers and gate smashers. They are kin to the devil. They are wildly, lively little creatures. But having taken up the practice of farming with goats, I would as soon never farm again than to farm without them, because there exists within them the capacity for affection rivaled only by a dog. And that is truly what I have found. If you could show the other picture, Mary, if you could get that up. I don't know how much more I've got to tell you guys here. I'm happy to share anything about goats and about my grazing journey. The summation of it is I don't do tight pastures. I put them out there. I let them express their goatness, let them eat what they want on the pasture. We certainly have a lot of fun with them. When Randy was showing his video of the goats jumping around, this is what I might go out and do with the goats and just relax. What's that?
Goat yoga.
Well, we do host that once a year at our farm. I don't participate. I go try to find some fence to fix or something. My wife was out of town for work, and this was about 90 degrees that night, and I'm like, I'm going to go out in the pasture with the goats because it was too hot and they didn't want to be in the barn. The sun wasn't shining, so they were great. They wanted to go out. And I went out there with them, and I had a video that went along with this. And you'll see they're good little grazers. They really do enjoy eating the grass. And I think they get a lot out of it. I really do. But there's no studies that have ever been done much on goats in this country to tell us how good, bad, or otherwise they could do on pasture. But if anything, I can lay out here with them. I can observe my goats. I can just watch them for the way they walk and move and for their general health. I can send my wife funny pictures when she's out of town for work, and I'm just out here with the goats hanging out. And that's what this picture was for. She told me she missed them. I told her I missed her. If anything, not too much though, because my goats were out there with me. But I'm not the norm as far as most dairy goat people don't put them out on pasture much. And I try to have mine out there as much as I can.
How old is your oldest goat?
Oh, let's see. She'd be 10 this year. And I've had ones that have gone older. They do start to, when they get to that old, they do start to go down on milk production a decent amount. They don't They don't, generally a lot of times they're only having one kid. Their fertility's not as good. And that's just in a general. They can live 15, I won't say 20. I've never been around a goat that's been 20, but we had one that was close to 15 one time. But we call fairly heavy if they're not cutting the mustard as far as milk production or reproductive performance. Because goats are prolific breeders. I mean, they have 2 or 3 animals, babies every year. So we call fairly heavy. I'm not going to tell you the meat market's great on goats. It is good if you have meat goats. I'd say the prices are good or intriguing to most people, I would say. But our dairy culls and our dairy wethers, that market's not terribly great. I mean, it's nice to be able to sell them and get something out of them. But so that's our oldest goat, I guess.
Why aren't you milking 200?
I once milked 200, and my barn's not big enough. I was told by people that 15 square feet per goat is enough. And I did all the measurements, and I could milk like 190 in my barn on those measurements. And my goats were constantly thin. They were constantly sick. And you'd go out in the morning, and barely one goat was laying down. Pens were always wet. Pens were always dirty. And I started talking to more and more people, and they said you should probably get that closer to 25 square feet per goat. And we've gotten closer to that. And my herd health has improved. They carry a lot more weight now. My pasture lasts longer as far as I don't have as many out there. So I have more pasture, more areas that I can. I don't rotate tight, but I have different solid fences that I can move them throughout. So I can put them on this patch or that patch, or put them out in that woods for a while. And again, mine don't get their full forage diet off of pasture, but just because of some of those lessons I learned when I started, they weren't going to do it the way I thought I could do it. So
when you supplement, do
Yep.
you supplement so they have the ability to go up to get their supplemental feed?
I mean, put their heads up?
Yes.
Yeah, they're fed in a basket feeder that's that tall off the ground. So, yeah, or in hay bunks they're reaching through. There's no reaching down at all. Yep. So.
When the goats get outside of the fence, do they find their way home on their own, or do they need encouragement?
So when the goats first started getting out, it was like DEFCON 6 around our place. Like, the goats are out, and it was like when the cows were out, when the heifers were out. And my dad, like, there were a few times I got called home from work because the goats were out. Dad's like, you got to get home, the goats are out. And eventually he learned that they don't want to go terribly far from the barn. They want to get out, they want to run around, they want to eat something that they couldn't have, and they really just kind of want to go back in. They're not smart enough to really go back in the spot they got out of. They're like most cattle that way. But Dad found that he could get them in kind of pretty much on his golf cart, or had a little help from his little dog that he used to have. Generally, they'd rather follow you than be chased or shooed. That's where I was telling Randy about if I could get my grazing system kind of put in. I would like to put a lane in, because if I want to go to my upper pasture, it takes my wife, my dad on his golf cart, and myself to move them up there. And we're not going to be able to just gently shoo them. It's a squirrel, they run this way, or if something's over there they want to see, and all I'm trying to do is get them into that next pasture, where I know they'll be happy but they want to screw around with everything that we've already run them across. So, they don't go very far, and it's not like they scatter. Again, they really like us. They really, really do. So they're not terribly hard to get in, and they don't go far away. So maybe they want to go over to the neighbors. I did have that happen once or twice, one time the neighbor's kid came walking them back, and that was just, it was about as simple as can be. I opened the gate and the little kid walked him in, So they're a different thing, that's for sure. So.
Do they follow better than being pushed?
Oh yeah, yes, by far. Yep. They follow by far better. Shake a pail. We all know that. Shake a pail. I think the goats are especially good at that. As far as using like cattle panels, I love cattle panels, but I tried cattle panels with step-in posts one time to try to make it a little bit more movable. They just got up on 4 or 5 of them, got up on the cattle panel, bent that over, and got out. So it isn't. It's like I said, fence smashers and gate crashers. They don't. It's one thing about them, like just going into like carcass. They don't muscle anywhere near like a beef cattle would muscle. They carry most of their fat like a deer on the outside. So one time I left some out on pasture in the rain and they couldn't get out, and I killed a couple because they just got cold out in that rain and they just couldn't, they couldn't, it's like they couldn't, their bodies couldn't sustain. I don't think that's always the case. My feeding program wasn't near as good back then. Maybe if I would have been feeding them some good corn, but they'll just bunch up by the gate and try to come in when it's raining. So that's a challenge. They're not just going to go out all day like that. And I wish I could have seen I wish I would have just called Randy and said, "Hey, Randy, can I come over and see your setup and learn about proper grounding and all that stuff?" And maybe I still will. So eventually one of these days. But yeah. So any other questions? If you don't have anything else, you can definitely see me when we're afterwards. Yes.
So what does your dad think about all this? Because he was hardcore dairy guy, right?
Yep. I was told by a goat guy from Menominee one time. He says, "Goats are great. You just got to get past what the neighbors are going to think about you." And that was, for me, it was what the neighbors thought about me, and it was also what my parents thought about me. At the time, they had grandchildren, not mine, my sister's kids. Of course, the kids loved the goats. So my dad kind of tolerated them at first. And then when he found he could get them in by himself, that wasn't so bad. And he helps me make hay, he helps me sort animals. One time I tricked him into milking for me, one group, and he said, "You ever do that to me again, I'm never coming in the barn again." So he does not help me milk, but that's fine. My wife and I do it along with just an army of 4-H and FFA managerial kids, as we would call them. So yes, Jeff.
So like with our cows at home, they want to get milk. Do these come in?
Oh yeah.
Like that?
Yep.
And want to get milk?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. If anybody ever wants to come to a goat dairy, you're more than welcome. Just see me, find me on Facebook or anything.
Do you milk once or twice a day?
Twice a day. Yep. Some guys milk 3 times a day, and I've been asked why I don't, and I said I like milking, but I don't like it that much. So,
And how long have you been working with goats, Jason?
We've been milking right around 10 years, but I've had goats it's probably been about 15 all told. So, and at first I made a lot of mistakes just in general. I mean, I don't ever want anybody to ever have to make the mistakes I made. So if you have a question, don't be afraid to ask. I mean, some of the stuff I did was just ludicrous. I mean, just looking back on it now, but I learned. So I guess that's the main part. So, yeah. So I thank you guys all for inviting me here, and it's really good company when you get to speak alongside Ken and alongside Randy. They're a couple I would call giants in the industry. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for asking me, Mary. So.